Chapter 9. Revelations. I look like the puppy ... that was only partially antiqued. Laughter rang out around the small grove of trees currently occupied by the reincarnated soldier and Turks. Oh come on Seth, it's not that bad. Don't give me that glare. Zack was leaning up against his beloved mentor as they sat under the trees. They had been out here for about 20 minutes so far, having all decided to skip class in favor of simply being with old friends and allies. Angel smiled seeing his best friend glaring at his pup before going back to looking at his reflecting in the water's edge. Like all of them, Seth was slowly transforming back to his old self, and it was quite an interesting look. Zack and himself looked like they had dipped their hands in black ink and then carded said hands through their hair, leaving huge black streaks among blonde and red. Sephiroth was the same, only like he said it looked like someone had tried to antique him and failed horribly. Now this is a funny sight. Zack motioned to where Rufus and Reno was sitting practically in each other's laps. It was not a very well kept secret in Shinra that Rufus has taken one of his Turks as a lover. While most had assumed it was Tseng, they were shocked to learn it was the loud-mouthed Reno. While they were used to that it was who they were now, that made it funny as hell. Draco Malfoy is George Weasley's boyfriend. Ron is going to have a shit fit. Saisnai started to giggle like hell from her spot next to Rude and Elena. Understatement, my dear brother. Zack and Saisnai grinned at each other. This honestly was so weird that now most of them were actually blood-related. Zack, Reno, and Saisnai. All brothers and sister. Reno and Rufus families are mortal enemies. On top of that, Sephiroth and Rufus are mortal enemies. The goddess has a warped sense of humor. Angel said, shaking his head. Just like his puppy found this whole thing quite amusing. That she does. Sephiroth. Sploosh. Jumping slightly, the group all looked over to where Sephiroth had been standing only seconds before and then over to the rippling agitated water. Did anyone else see that blur that wiped out the general? Reno pushed himself up off Rufus' lap and slowly moved to the water's edge. A second later, Sephiroth broke the surface, gasping for air, and turned to glare as a head of Auburn popped up a second later. Genesis. He snarled, but it was quickly forgotten as the redhead commander launched himself at his lover, grabbing him tightly, kissing him deeply. Instantly Sephiroth melted against the only man to ever get this close to him. Oh, get a room, you two. Tseng nearly jumped out of his skin from the voice that suddenly appeared behind and the arms that wrapped around him. Whipping his head around, he growled darkly but relaxed into the hold of his own lover. Damn it, Cloud. He snarled. But it was only half-assed at best. Hush. Cloud smiled, sitting down behind Tseng. Well, would have if he was not bowled over seconds later by a hyperactive puppy. Cloud. Grunting as his back slammed into first Jirugi, Cloud looked up at his longtime best friend sitting on his waist, looking every inch his puppy namesake. Zack. Laughing, Zack hugged the blonde tightly, ruffling his hair playfully. Been wait a long Spike. Laughing, Cloud swatted the puppy away but stood up and pulled him right back in for a hug. Cloud. Instantly Cloud stiffened, hearing that deep baritone that had haunted his nightmares for years. Pulling away, Zack gently squeezed Cloud's shoulder as he was confronted once more with the man that had changed his life. Taking a deep breath, Cloud looked up into those acid silver-green eyes. There was no insanity in their depths, simply remorse. Before Sephiroth could open his mouth, Cloud shook his head, a small smile playing on his face. I understand, General. You don't need to apologize for something that happened over 9,000 years ago. Sephiroth nodded slightly, a small smile playing on his lips. We need a rematch. Sephiroth turned and headed back to his lover. It's disgraceful to have lost to a chocobo ... 3 times. The group all snorted and started to laugh, especially at the dumbfounded look that crossed Cloud's face. Yes, Cloud, Sephiroth does have a sense of humor. Zack slapped his back before padding back over to his mentor and sat back down on the cold grass. A bit on the dry side. But it's there. Moving back over to his lover, Cloud sat down behind him once more, wrapping his arms around him. Sephiroth moved back over to his own lover. He would kick his ass later for the BS he pulled in Nibelheim when they were alone, seeing that Rufus was currently occupied with his beloved guardhound and the two girls were cooing over Nanaki. "Where's my father?" Sighing, Genesis marched into the trees. There was a sound of a scuffle and suddenly a figure in black leather and a red cloak was shoved out into the clearing. Regaining his footing so he didn't go face first into the grass, Vincent turned and glared at the smirking Genesis as the Auburn first sauntered out into the clearing once more. Unconsciously pulling his cloak around himself, Vincent looked over to his long-lost son. Vincent looked at the group and then to his son and motioned towards the woods. Understanding the silent request, Sephiroth nodded and the two headed off in the Forbidden Forest. They didn't need an audience. Angel said, running his fingers absently through his puppy's hair. He didn't hold any sexual feelings for the boy, simply that of a father and son. "So how are we going to go about this? You know Dumbledore isn't going to sit back when we have suddenly started changing," Elena said, her fingers absently running through Nanaki's fur. "And our families for that matter. I know they aren't our real families, but..." Tseng snorted, leaning more into Cloud. "My mother can go to hell for all I care. After watching her murder 7 men for their money, I could care less what she does. Yes, my mother did murder her husbands." He knew it was the talk of those around him that it seemed all his stepfathers seemed to die in mysterious circumstances. "She doesn't even know which one is my true father. So." He shrugged, leaning back more into the warm hard chest. Cloud tightened his arms around his lover, kissing the top of his head in what he hoped was a comforting manner. "Damn Tseng. We're sorry you go from shit family to shit family." Reno moved over and sat next to the man he viewed as a second father. "Seems like the Weasleys are really the only ones that ended up with a nice family." "My father is nice, a little on the eccentric side, but he has always cared for me." Elena leaned over, resting on Nanaki, who wrapped his firetail around her gently. "I do miss my sister though." The group fell silent, everyone's minds going back to all the friends and family they had lost. Feeling left out since his lover was with his father, Genesis moved over to his best friend and sat down, curling up against him. Smiling slightly, Angel wrapped his arm around Genesis, pulling him in tight. He had his family back and they were all sane. "Let's wait for Seth to get back before we try and figure out who we're going to go about the rest of the year." "Well, we may not have time for that," Elena said, pointing towards the castle where they could make out Ron and Hermione's forms moving towards them. "Doesn't Weasley ever get a fucking hint?" Rufus snarled, leaning in against Dark Nation, who growled at the two making their way towards them. "Careful, Shinra. He's still our brother." Saisnai leveled a glare at her boss. Huffing, Rufus turned away, lying back down against Dark Nation with Reno lying down on the other side. "Who are they?" Cloud asked, pulling first Jirugi from his back and laid it down on the grass next to him. The sword was starting to dig into his back painfully. He might have been immortal thanks to the Genova cells. Didn't mean he didn't feel his age. "Ron Weasley and Hermione Granger." Ron is Reno and Zach's younger brother. Saisnai's older. Hermione is just a mole-born friend of theirs. Both are attached to Sephiroth. Tseng scooted so he was now in Cloud's lap, more than content there. Smiling, Cloud wrapped his arms around the man, pulling him in close. "You're being real lovey today." Laughing softly, Tseng laid his head down on Cloud's shoulder. "I feel good today. Like a huge weight has been lifted off my shoulders." Pulling the band from his lover's hair, Cloud carded his fingers through the now soft silk, curling him up, performed the now much younger man. "The you guys are, Dumbledore has been looking all over for you. Who are you?" Hermione and Ron had moved up to the group, both stopping as they caught sight of Blaise sitting in the lap of a man with spiky blonde hair and a massive sword laying by his side. A single blonde brow rose as Cloud regarded the two of them. There was something about the two of them that he didn't like. He didn't know what it was. Something about their body language was almost hostile, especially the gingers. Looking to his lover to see if it was all right, he received a nod and turned back. "My name is Cloud Strife." "What do you want, Weasley?" Rufus had sat up and was currently rubbing Dark Nation's head lovingly, what he would not give to have his shotgun once more. Hearing Malfoy's drawl, Ron turned his ears, instantly turning red as he saw George's arms wrapped around Malfoy's waist. "George, what the hell are you doing with Malfoy?" Rolling his eyes, Reno pulled Rufus in tighter and laid a kiss on his cheek. "He's my boyfriend, you." "Reno," came from several different directions. Reno ducked his head, smiling, and stood up, moving away to light up a cig, knowing that with all the soldiers there they would kick his ass if he lit up around them. Tseng pinched the bridge of his nose and sent a glare at a second in command. "I swear to Leviathan, Reno, you are going to give me more gray hair than Sephiroth." The group all laughed and Cloud rubbed his back gently. "It's all right, Tseng. I can go kick him around the grounds if you want." "Oh fuck that chocobo." Rufus reached up and put a hand over Reno's mouth. "Reno, Tseng. What the hell is going on?" "Eloquent, isn't he?" Genesis rolled his eyes, flipping open his beloved Loveless, and went to ignoring the Ron and Hermione. They weren't a part of them, they were just normal humans. "Genesis." Angel chided softly, earning him a snort from the Auburn commander. "I'll handle it." Rufus pushed himself up just as Sephiroth moved out of the forest, Vincent in tow. He barely glanced at Ron and Hermione as he moved over to Genesis and sat down in his lap, startling the older Crimson commander. "Well, hello, beautiful." "Shut up, Genesis." Laughing, Genesis put his beloved book back into his jacket and wrapped his arms around his lover, holding him tight. Rufus moved so that he was standing directly in front of Ron and Hermione, his blue eyes cocky and sure of himself with that arrogance he always wore. He knew who he was, and he knew he was powerful even if Shinra was long since gone. "The information you are about to hear is classified. You tell anyone else. I will personally make sure that my Turks ensure you never speak again." He ignored the looks from Ron and Hermione, folding his arms across his chest. "My real name is Rufus Shinra, president of Shinra Electric Power Company. We existed over 9,000 years ago, in a city that was lost to the ocean. I believe the people of this time call it Atlantis. We called it Midja." "How the hell can you be over 9,000 years old?" "Only those three are." Rufus motioned to Cloud, Genesis, and Vincent. "Oh, Nanaki. Forgive me, Gi." Nanaki simply nodded his head, allowing Rufus to handle this. "I can't believe that those three are over 9,000 years old," Ron said, his voice taking on a dark tone as he looked at the three very young-looking men. Genesis tossed his head arrogantly, causing Sephiroth to chuckle softly. "I can assure you, kid, we've been alive that long. 8,900 years until someone invented shampoo. You know how long it took to get my hair back to his luster." This caused the entire group to burst out laughing, all of them very familiar with exactly how vain Genesis was. "I'm grateful I was dead. I do not know if I could handle 9,000 years of you bitching." Sephiroth smirked, ducking a swat from the Crimson commander. "Harry, what are you saying?" Sighing, Sephiroth reluctantly stood up from his lover's embrace and moved over to stand in front of his two friends. "Those you see before you, aside from Genesis, Cloud and Vincent, all died nearly 9,000 years ago. We were granted the chance at life once more by the goddess, to redeem ourselves of our past sins. Over the past few months our memories have been returning along with our prior bodies." "Is that why you have become so cold recently?" Hermione moved up so that she was standing directly in front of Harry. "Sephiroth was always distant when we knew him. It took a great deal of time for Genesis and myself to even be considered friends to him and simply not his officers." Angel gently rubbed his puppy's head once more. "Sephiroth? Is that your real name?" Sephiroth nodded, Soldier First Class, Sephiroth Valentine. General of the Shinra Army. You're a bloody general? Ron moved up and already Sephiroth could see the jealousy starting to build in him. What about you? Fred. George. Ginny. Zack looked up at his mentor before looking back to his little brother. Soldier First Class, Lieutenant Zachary Fair. Second in command of the Shinra Army when Genesis and Angel deserted. Reno, Commander of the Turks. President Shinra's personal security, spies, assassins. You know it, you. We did it. Kidnapping, espionage, assassination, interrogation, torture. He shrugged as if this was the most normal thing in the world. No twi big boss man said don't talk. Tseng is about as dedicated as a director as you can get. Right, boss man? Tseng nodded from Cloud's lap, his dark eyes sweeping over the horrified-looking Ron and Hermione. I killed my own director on President Shinra's orders. In other words, he had no problem taking out 2 children. Ron swallowed and looked to his little sister. Ginny? Glancing up, Saisnai shook his head. Saisnai of the Turks. If their eyes glow they are soldier. The rest are Turks. Ron and Hermione glanced at the group, seeing other than Cloud the soldier and Turks were separated. Soldier are the elite of the Shinra military, specially enhanced beyond superhuman. First class are the most powerful of the group. All 4 soldier here are first class. Cloud is enhanced to first class standard but was never soldier. Thanks for the reminder. Cloud growled but was silenced by a kiss from Tseng. Hush. Stop stealing my word, Tseng. Bite me, Seph. Everyone smiled hearing the ever-familiar banter between Tseng and Sephiroth. So. Let me get this straight, not only are you Harry Potter, you're General Sephiroth? Sephiroth's eyes darkened hearing the bitter jealous tone in Ron's voice. Instantly the group watched Sephiroth draw back behind the cold mask he spent his entire life building. Yes, he is both people. He was not given the option of choosing who he to become when he was born. I suggest, child, that you drop the jealousy unless you wish to undergo the same treatments and horrors that these boys have had to go through to become who they are. Vincent's cold crimson eyes were boring into Ron's. Tell me, Ron, would you be able to pick up a sword and run it through another human being? Would you be able to take a human life, to fight wars and still hold your sense of self? If you cannot answer yes to any of those questions, then you, child, have no grounds to judge those that sit here. Though if you continue to do so, I will gladly show you what these Turks and soldier have gone through to reach the position they hold. Sephiroth stared at his father before a brilliant smile lit his face. Dad. Vincent turned his back on Ron and Hermione and moved back to his position against one of the trees. Cloud smiled up at his friend, seeing he had already taken on his parental role. Ron and Hermione had the most dumbfounded look on their faces. You two better get going, don't you have class? Rufus held no remorse for those two. They were sticking their noses in where it didn't belong. Zack pushed himself onto his feet and moved over to Cloud and picked up his sword. Come on, Spike. I need to start building up muscles, and I want to see how good you are now.
Well, I do hope you enjoyed the videos so far and video game content. And don't forget to subscribe, hit that like button, and leave a comment down below. And I noticed 40% of you guys are not subscribed to the channel. If you can, please subscribe to the channel. It'll help me and help the channel grow. Until next time, goodbye!